Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this short session on understanding hoarding with myself, Jack Moore, and Hannah Scott and Fraser MacKinnon, also who'll be joining a little bit later on in the presentation. Okay, so I'm actually Jack Moore from Respect My Stuff. That's the name of my company. I'll let Fraser and Hannah introduce P3 a bit later on as well. But Respect My Stuff, there's two sides to the company. There's the training side. So I've been training on hoarding and mental health for the last 18 years. But then the more exciting part, I think, of the training that I do, or not the training, but Respect My Stuff, is the de-hoarding. So what happened was, as a result of training for years with housing associations, local authorities, social workers, environmental health, etc., it was very, quickly became apparent that actually you as housing providers and as housing professionals, you don't have the time that's required for dealing with hoarding. So I started up the de-hoarding service in mainly the southwest of England, but also in Northern Ireland. So, and I've just actually returned from a week in Northern Ireland, so apologies if I'm speaking a bit faster than I normally would. Always happens. Okay, so what I've done, just to start off with and to give you more of an understanding of hoarding, is I've taken some of the slides that I've used and, over the years, and adapted them and fine-tuned them, but just taken a few of the slides that are in this presentation and to give you an understanding. So hopefully along the way also I can give you some really, practical tips. So even if you are trying to deal with a hoarding case, is that, you can take something away from this short session. Okay. The main thing, I remember years ago spending so much time on trying to work out a sort of a base measure for hoarding, where we are with hoarding and to be honest, it was wasted time because, out there from the International OCD Foundation is the clutter image rating, and it's absolutely invaluable. So I'm sure a lot of you out there are aware of it, but for any of you who aren't, it really is the best tool to have. If you've got to put in place a policy or procedure, this should be your Appendix 1, the actual clutter image rating. What I do and what my de-hoarding practitioners do is we actually have it in, I hope you can see that, in laminated form. And we actually take this out when we're talking through, hoarding to the people who are in their own homes, who are doing the hoarding or living in extreme clutter. We will talk it through with them. So I'm just going to spend a little bit of time on the clutter image rating, some of the just to show you how valuable a tool it is. So there's 4 rooms. There's the living room, kitchen, bathroom, and bedroom that are shown in the clutter image rating. But to be honest, it doesn't matter. It's the same in each room. It's the degree of clutter, with 1 being the best and 9 being the most cluttered. With the de-hoarding work that I do, the service level agreements I have with the housing providers and social workers, etc., we deal with, our service level agreement is to try and get, usually people that are referred to us are 8s or 9s. We try to get them to as close as we can to level 3. Not level 1, not spick and span, not like those awful TV programs. It doesn't work that way. Level 3 is acceptable. Level 3 reduces all the risk, the fire risk, the avalanche risk, the trip risk, etc. So that's our plan. For some people, we don't get there, and we don't need to get there, because actually everyone is different. But just in general, it's as close to level 3 as we can. One of the things here is that the good practice nationally is that your procedures, whether you're in housing or whatever organization you're with, is that if you have a procedure or a policy in place for hoarding, it should really kick in around about level 4. So level 4, that's when you start getting the sort of the blocked doorways and the trip hazards. and of course the fire risk, which we'll come to a bit later. Just a few little practical tips here. So we will often work with someone on, let's say we go in and we're chatting to someone and they're on 7 or 8. We'll, maybe, get their agreement by showing them the laminated version and sort of comparing and saying, look, this is where we think you're at. What do you think? So that they take ownership of it also. And we'll say, look, our goal is to get you to as close to level 3, so they know, roughly where we're getting to. And what we say is, we'll take photographs each time we come, each week we come, we'll take photographs, and you will see week on week, month on month, us getting to there. And it is very, very rare that by asking it in that sort of positive fashion that they refuse. Very, very rare. So rather than saying, a closed question, do you mind if we take photographs? The answer is going to be yes, no, and no is the much easier one for them to do at that stage. But if we are being positive about it, that it's for them to see. Because also what we find is that many people forget what it was like maybe a month ago, 2 months ago. So it's really good to have those photographs to remind them also. So another tip, a practical tip you can take away from today is, and it's so simple, but it really does work. The first thing that we get the person who's hoarding to pledge to do or not to do is that they pledge that they won't bring anything new in during that time frame. So if someone's on a 7 and they don't bring anything new in, they can't go to an 8, they can't go to a 9. So you've really, in a way, broken the camel's back in that it's not going to get any worse. The only other, in some cases, maybe the reason behind the hoarding is that they have got an absolute obsession with particular stuff. And they'll maybe say to you, look, there's no way that I won't be able to buy or purchase or, bring in whatever if I see it or if it, becomes available. Is we have a bit of a compromise. We'll say there, okay, look, 1 in, 1 out. If you bring something in, you have to demonstrate, show us what you've let go of so that for that to come in. So and it has to be of at least the same volume. So the old thing, they can't bring in a new toaster to add to the 13 they've got already and get rid of a little teaspoon. It has to be of something of at least the same volume. So and that can be really helpful exercise also. When I'm doing this training, in a I don't know, group, maybe a, face-to-face 20, 30 people, but have the old thing, I'd say, so imagine number 9 there. Take a look at number 9, and I'll be asking the question, is that extreme clutter or is that hoarding? And it's amazing. Usually, if there's 20 people, you'll have fairly well half will say definitely hoarding. Others will be extreme clutter. And it's not just to catch people up, it's just you cannot tell from a photograph alone. And that's why. So the difference, and it's so important that you, in your jobs, can find out very quickly the difference between hoarding and extreme clutter. So a number 9 could be either. And the only way is by, being with that person and maybe having the sort of conversation, like, we're really concerned about the fire risk, the avalanche risk, the trip, we need to start moving things around. We need to start making these pathways much wider. And from that, you will get this sort of the response. It'll be, oh, no, you can't touch that. You know, and you say, well, look, there's a load of stuff there. I can see, old pizza boxes, whatever, and there's bits of pizza in them, that's going off, that'll attract vermin. No, I want to keep that. If you get to this stage where it's pretty obvious they've got a disproportionate attachment to the stuff in that room, we're looking at hoarding. And this happens in probably more than half the cases we get that are referred to us as hoarding. They're not actually hoarding, it's extreme clutter. It is just built up and built up and built up, usually related one way or another to depression and other things. But the person becomes overwhelmed. They don't know where to start, and it just gets worse and worse. So it's the reason you want to know the difference. You still have to deal with it, whether it be hoarding or extreme clutter, but the reason you want to find out which one it is the time frame. If it is extreme clutter and you've got the resources, that can be cleared out in a day or two. That can be done, if you've got enough people to help you, if you've got enough, people to take things away and they're happy enough for it to go. The problem then is who deals with the reason for it. The reason for it, let's say it's depression, clinical depression, who's going to deal with that? So that's where we need possibly the mental health services, the community mental health teams to get involved, because I can tell you they probably won't get involved if it's just what they think hoarding. If it is hoarding and not extreme clutter, and there's that disproportionate attachment, then it is going to take longer. We, spend months. I did, one of my longest case actually is one in Belfast, and she's been over 2 years now, but to the absolute extreme. But usually we get our results, we get an 85% success rate with that level 3 in 10, 12, 14, maybe 16 weeks. So, a matter of months, but that's half day a week over that period of time. I wish I could see you all. I wish I could know if you want to know any more about clutter image rating. But anyway, it's a really easy tool to use, and certainly when I'm using it in our local authority areas that we're working in, and certainly in the London boroughs that I've worked in, and any other place around the country, it is fire and rescue use it widely. Social services are using it more and more. Housing, anyone who I've done housing policies and procedures with absolutely use it. It's so easy. Okay, so moving on then. The fourth one down there on the left hand, see hoarding disorder. That's an interesting one, because it's only the last few years it's really come to light. It's I think it's 2018, the World Health Organization recognized it in the international classification, hoarding disorder, as a mental illness in its own right. However, most cases of hoarding or extreme clutter, so your 7s, your 8s, and your 9s, result from other things, and all that stuff that you can see in front of you, depression through to schizophrenia, through to dementia, through to the learning difficulties as in neurodiverse, Tourette's, things like the autistic spectrum, they can all end up with people getting to those 7, 8, and 9s, what we call the high risk, either hoarding or extreme clutter. We don't have the time at all to go in today to go into each one bit by bit. But if I give you, I'm actually in my little office now, and I've got probably 30 live cases on the boards here. And I was taking a look this morning, and of that 30 live cases, round about half, they have all come to us from housing associations, from social workers, mainly housing association and social workers, and a few others as well, some self-referred, but they've all come as hoarding. They're not. Probably half of them, just under half of them, are actually extreme clutter. And when it comes to hoarding disorder, and this isn't just of the current tranche we've got, this is going back over the years. If I've got 30 on the whiteboards, there might be possibly 1, maybe 2 cases of hoarding disorder. And the reason being, let me just explain then, with hoarding disorder, I'll move on to the next slide, is that there are 5 quite strict criteria for it to meet the mental illness diagnosis of hoarding disorder. So have a look at this and just think of maybe any hoarding you've got now, and just ask yourselves, I wonder, do they have hoarding disorder? So first of all, does your person have persistent difficulty in discarding or parting with possessions regardless of the monetary value? Yeah, possibly. Okay. The difficulty in discarding is due to a perceived need to save the items, and also the distress and anxiety associated with discarding them. So if you've got 1 and 2, you're looking at hoarding, okay? You've got that disproportionate attachment. They don't want it to go. If it was extreme clutter, they'd be saying, oh yeah, it can go. I don't mind it going. So we're looking at hoarding now. But is it hoarding disorder? So the difficulty discarding results in the accumulation of possessions of congestion, clutter, active living areas, a bit like the clutter image rating: living room, kitchen, bathroom, bedroom. and hallways in between and stairways in between. Not the spare bedroom, not the attic, not the garden, not the garage, not the storage unit. It can be hoarding, they can be hoarding, but it's not hoarding disorder. It's active living areas. The hoarding causes clinically significant distress or impairment in social occupation, rather important areas of functioning. Yeah, it probably does. But finally, because so many of them can get to number 4, and then finally, the hoarding is not attributable to another medical condition or mental disorder or another problem. So that could be things like physical illness. So physical illness, just someone being, disorganized. Maybe they've been discharged from hospital far too early, hip replacement, things fall, they're too proud to ask for help. They live on their own, and things just build up and build up and build up. And it leads from the physical illness to they get very depressed because of what they see. They're not used to that, but they don't maybe want to ask things, and that can really build up again to that high risk 7, 8, and 9s. Dementia, absolutely. Depression, alcohol and drug misuse. This is a big one that we're finding, sort of more anecdotally than in the books or whatever, but certainly alcohol and drug misuse, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder. Often, you ever come across a place where and you go into the property and it is full of stuff that hasn't even been opened. It's, they've especially things like even during, sort of the coronavirus, that period time frame, but also before and after, people just, they buy and not even knowing what's in the box that they've that's been delivered. Quite often that can be associated with bipolar disorder. Learning disability or acquired brain injury. So if in an acquired brain injury, let's say someone is in a terrible road traffic accident, maybe, I don't know, come off a horse, come off a scaffolding, and the part of their brain that is damaged is the part that controls organization and decision making, that can lead very quickly again to our 7, 8s, and 9s. What else we got here? Autism and related disorders, absolutely. OCD. OCD, we often think, don't we, of the opposite of hoarding. However, they reckon about 1 in 20 now, but 5% of people with OCD, the mental illness, obsessive compulsive disorder, will actually hoard. And with their hoarding, their keeping, quite often it's around recycling, around waste, and in extreme cases, it might even be their own bodily waste that they will not let go of. We've got ADHD, we've got post-traumatic stress, victim of crime, stressful life event, guilt about rest, I've mentioned before. Okay, risk factors. Probably the biggest one here is fire. It's so important, and if I can just throw in here, I've dealt with hundreds now of hoarding cases, and the vast majority of them are smart, intelligent, well-read people. And if you just go in and say, "Oh, it's this room's a fire risk," it'll probably just go over their head. But if you treat them as sort of smart, intelligent people and say, "Look, do you know that the recent statistics are that 1 in 4 household fire deaths are caused by the likes of this," and bring it into the room, caused by the likes of this. But also 90-40, which I actually prefer. So in an unhoarded, uncluttered property, if there's a fire and rescue can contain, this is statistics, can contain the fire to the room of origin in 90% of cases. If the room is cluttered or hoarded, and again, bring it to this room and say like this, that 90% drops to 40%. So there's not a 10% chance of it escaping into another room or into the hallway. There's a 60% chance of it escaping. And the main thing is, if you're in a block of flats and getting that over to them, that could mean into an adjoining flat also. So just so they know the risk that they could be causing. Structural damage, oh my goodness, the weight of stuff that we bring out of some of the houses we've been dealing with. If you take the 3.5 ton tipper truck has been able to take either best part of a ton, in weight, or 6 cubic meters of stuff. The biggest one we had was it was a 3-bedroom terraced, or I can't remember, semi-detached or terraced property. But usually we allow for, if we're doing a de-hoarding, we'd usually allow during maybe the 3-month time frame, let's say, we might allow for 1 tipper truck, as well as, every time we go, when stuff was to be let go of, we'll take it and dispose of it, whether that be to charity shops or to wherever. But anyway, we allow usually for 1 tipper truck, possibly 2. The worst case we had was 29 tipper load trucks, and we were digging the stuff out of the kitchen. Anyway, but the weight of that stuff is unbelievable. Disease, injury, infestation. It might be that people say, "Oh, it's all clean. It's a dry hoard," and that's fine. But actually, you can't get behind it. You can't get under it. You can't get it, to clean. So stuff can build up. And then don't underestimate this one: avalanche. For you, thinking of your own safety, thinking of the safety of the person who is hoarding or in extreme clutter, is avalanche. And there's been so many injuries and deaths over the years from stuff just falling on them. So beware and do your dynamic risk assessment all the time as well. Okay. So just very briefly, I've gone through a little bit of the training sort of sessions we would do, but the hoarding service is, the way it works is we would receive a referral from usually a housing association or local authority housing, or maybe social services. From that then, and the referral, we ask them to sort of, look at sort of the risks that they might be aware of also. We'll then do an initial visit where we get maybe the person who's referring to introduce us to the person in their property. As a result of that initial visit then, I'll provide a quote. If the quote is acceptable, we try and make sure that funding is in place so that we don't hang around. We don't want to get their hopes up and then they're dashed because you as a provider have to start looking for the funding. So that can take time. The visits commence, and then we do the working sheets, the progress meeting, usually halfway through, and then we either us or the referrers will make sure that there's ongoing support and monitoring to prevent relapse. Just a few other bits and pieces here. When we're looking for people, I can get all the best CVs in the world, but that means nothing. It's the person themselves. It's so many people, you just wouldn't put them in a hoarding case because they need that empathy, understanding, and more. You can't even put your finger on it. Our default is to work in pairs. I could spend the whole afternoon explaining to you the reasons why. To me, it's an absolute no-brainer why we work in pairs. It's an absolute hands-on service. We do get our hands dirty. We get very mucky. We're dealing with it, but we're getting them to work with us as well and setting them little targets. Tipper van, if and when required. So a typical case might be 3 hours a week for 3 months. We get to know them. People open up. People, we're with them much longer than any community mental health team, nurse, or maybe a GP or a social worker. We're with them an awful lot longer. We really get to know them and build that rapport with them. I mentioned that 85% success rate. And finally, just the other 3 bits we do: hospital discharge, really successful, particularly in the Hampshire area, where we will maybe clear a room ready for a bed, so to stop the old, that expression, bed blocking. That's been successful, but we don't just go in and clear. We will sift through. We will keep anything that we think is of any sort of sentimental, financial, maybe it might be personal papers, whatever. We make sure they're kept and put somewhere else so that the person can go through them eventually. And then regional hoarding support groups, again, really successful. Our aim is to get them to be user-led. Easier said than done, but and this is where they're usually only once a month in different areas, and it's for people who hoard or live in extreme clutter, or maybe their family members that just don't get it, or friends, and they can sit around, have a cup of tea and a bicky and talk. And it's the feedback we get from these is excellent. Okay, so I do believe we are moving on now to, I think, Fraser's going to come in and start on the introduce P3. Okay, Fraser, over to you.
Yeah, cracking. Thanks, Jack. It's really good to see so many people attending, all from all over the UK. So myself and Hannah are just going to talk about P3 and the hoarding services that we provide. So just a quick overview on who we are. So P3 are a housing charity. We've been providing housing-related support since 1972. We provide support in communities across England with housing, homelessness, mental health, social exclusion, and more. So we work with 33,000 people annually and around 9,000 people at any one time. P3 itself stands for People, Potential and Possibilities. And that's the ethos that we have throughout all of the work that we do. We are people-led, putting people first to create a lasting difference. Currently, we run hoarding services in 4 counties, Derbyshire, Warwickshire, Buckinghamshire and the district of Redditch. As the services have now been established, we're looking at rolling these out nationally across England. I'll pass over to Hannah.
Okay, so the way P3 deliver our hoarding support services, very similar things to Jack. So again, we have a very person-centered approach. So all of us at P3 have undergone training in psychologically informed environments, trauma-informed care. So we really try to bring that into the support that we deliver to people. So we have quite a gradual approach. We have different variations in the services depending on the areas they're in. But in some areas we've got quite a lot of time that we can give to people. So we try and have quite a gradual approach, combining that in-house practical support. Well, we're, as Jack said, support people around decluttering their homes and, looking at those risks, trying to minimize those risks for people. But we'll also provide that emotional and psychological support. So being with them through that process, providing coaching, advice and guidance and things like that. So our real aim is to kind of build that trust and rapport with people. Even sometimes we might, not even go into the home on the first visit. We might say, do you want to come and meet us for a coffee, get to know that person, because we know how daunting it can be for someone to let us into their homes to start with. So like I said, it's really led by each individual, and everything we try and do is holistic. So where we'll deliver that support, as Jack has said, we want to look at what's the root, what are the causes, and what other support may people need, not just to help them manage their home, but to manage whatever area it is in their life. So we will look at kind of what other services are available that we could signpost and refer into to build that person's support network.
Yeah, so absolutely. It's about operating with a collaborative approach. It's about working together. So helping someone to address their hoard is a difficult process. They might not feel ready. They might not recognize that they have a problem at all. This is where we put a strong focus on building a good relationship with the people that we support. On average, we'll work with someone for just under a year. This gives our hoarding coach the time to get to know that individual, to get to know what works for them, how support works for them. And it allows us to keep consistency, booking in a regular time, once a week, to build our support into their routine. It's important that support is not brought in as a dramatic change, but that one that goes at their pace and is respectful of people's limitations and their goals.
Okay, so yeah, and part of that approach is our motivational techniques. So everyone at P3 has training in kind of around behavior change and motivational interviewing. So we really try and bring that into the support that we deliver. So as we said, obviously it is person-led. So we'll work with that individual to set small goals with them that will help them break down those bigger barriers that they might be facing. So we're really trying to focus on those small wins. As you've looked at like the clutter rating scale, we're not going to go into a room that's scored a 9 and just start tackling it. We're going to look at what are those smaller areas within that room we can start focusing on with that individual, and what areas would they like to see, you know, improve first as well. And then we'll work with them, discuss with them kind of different systems with that person. How is it that they want to see their home? What is it that they want to achieve through this? So we'll really try and kind of build that into the support and look at the way that they live their life and try and support them to kind of achieve what it is that they'd like to achieve, whilst obviously focusing on making them as safe as possible as we can.
Okay, right. Thanks, Hannah and Fraser. Okay, so what's the time now? 1:30. Right, so we've got 45 minutes for hopefully plenty of questions, and hopefully you'll get some answers as well. Yeah, so I'm going to actually come out of the presentation now so I can see what's going on. Right. Fraser, have you had a chance to take a look while I've been on that at any of the questions and answers?
Yeah, so we've got one here for yourself, Jack. So you said that you work with people for 3 months. So how do you manage that? Because a lot of the people they work with is for 18 months to make that sustainable. Due to wait lists and everything, that's obviously a problem we'll generally struggle with. So how do you manage to achieve that kind of support in 3 months?
Right. Hold on, just is the slideshow finished now? Is that? Hold on, just let me come out of that. Sorry. Okay. It just seems to happen. It just seems to happen. We had to, the problem is, you see, you know, ideally you would work with someone much, much longer, you know, for, you're talking about a year. I would say, you know, I've talked about, you know, our longest one being nearly 2.5 years now. The problem is when it comes to particularly the funding, whether it be a housing association or social services, or there's not a, you know, sort of there has to be an end to it, and it has to be something that's sort of measurable and they can see, or they won't get the funding. So that's what we find, and that's why we, you know, to me, 3 months wouldn't have been ideal, but actually it worked out really well because the concentrated effort we put in, and remember, it's the two, you know, getting back to that, 2 people to attend, it makes such a difference. We can get so much more done when we've got one who maybe is doing more of the interaction, you know, with the person, and the other is, it might be, because people who hoard, they love to talk. And when they're talking, and if you're trying to do something, you're on your own, you're trying to do something at the same time also, practically, it's very difficult. You either do one or the other. And what we find is quite often, if people are working on their own, they tend to be, there's nothing practically being done. Whereas with 2, they can get an awful lot more done. So it's, it works. Put it that way. It works.
Yeah, I mean, on the point of wait lists, because that's obviously something that you know, anyone who's working in the front line struggles with generally. We work with people obviously for the year. If it's a situation where we might be waiting on something, we have the same issue with funding. You know, our services are funded through different avenues. With Hannah's work with housing associations. Here in Warwickshire, we work with adult social care, and in Redditch, we're funded by the council. So there are different KPIs and things. There are different pots of money to use. And a lot of that sometimes comes down to, well, how much would it cost to evict that person? That's about the same budget we'll give you for that service. So you have to kind of keep that in mind. With waitlists and things, what we will tend to do is, if we reduce our hours with someone, so we keep them on our books, but say that we were just going to keep a check-in, so it's just going to be a video call or a call, just so we're still repeating the same messages, just so that we're having that contact. We haven't disappeared, we're not involved, we've not gone.
Yeah.
But it's nice to keep that connection, just so that someone knows there's something, you know, afterwards, because you never want to leave someone high and dry. And when you, in cases like this, where you work with someone for a long time, you build up a really good relationship, to cut that off without anything could be really detrimental. You know, lots of hoarders are, well, very private. It's a very private condition. So you need to work and really support them to have trust in services. You know, we might be one of the only services they've worked with. So that's generally how we go around waitlist, but it is a problem that I suppose we're all just having issues with.
When you say wait list, you're talking waiting list for having
support
for
potentially for referrals for other things. So if it's, you know, psychological support, say you're working with someone who you suspect might have autism or something like that, to get them on a wait list for that, and the support that you might get once you have a diagnosis, you're looking at 2 years in some places. It's a long old time. So you know, I'd be talking more about that.
We find that the particularly CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is one of the most sort of recognized ways for dealing with hoarding, is that it's very, very rare we use it, for the simple reason that we find we're doing it ourselves anyway. We are, you know, even though we're not therapists, we because of our sort of motivational interviewing, our skills, our experiences, our reasoning with them, our getting them to change, you know, the ways, we're doing more than most cognitive behavioral therapists can do. The problem with CBT is that, well, first of all, if you get it through the NHS, you're very, very lucky. But if you do, there's a massive waiting list. So if you know, you're not going to get that goal. You're putting it off, you know, kicking it down the street longer and longer. If you do get someone, they are usually restricted to 6 sessions. You need more than 6 sessions. It's been shown that you need really so 8 to 10 1-hour sessions to really make it work. Problem is it needs to be by someone who is specializing in OCD and hoarding, not just general cognitive behavioral therapy. So and even if you get that person, will they agree to go into the person's property and get their hands dirty and work with them also? Most will say, oh, no, come to my little lovely studio, you know, with all the lovely candles and everything. It doesn't work that way. So you understand, and so our I think as Anne-Marie was asking about that, you know, sort of the 3 months, how do you do it with the waiting list, etc. We don't. So if we do have a referral, we will ask the people, do you have the, you know, and let's be open, we're looking for sort of an average, I'm really talking, you know, sort of an average typical cost here, because it varies very widely, but nowadays we're talking between £3,000 and £4,000 for our intervention. And which is a drop in the ocean compared to, that's about the same cost as getting an injunction. If you don't do it in-house, getting an injunction, which what you get from that, maybe, you know, that you're allowed to clear it out, but you know, these forced clear outs don't work at all. It is you need that sort of time, and that. So yes, and waiting for us to come in. I know with a lot of the for instance, we work in Bristol, and we're finding more and more that even though Bristol City Council fund a service there, we've been asked to go in because of the waiting list to get into that funding. They would prefer to pay us to do that, literally starting next week. That's what we can do.
Yeah, and just on that point, I believe it was Catalyst Housing Association did a study a few years back on the costs for housing associations to house someone or to evict someone who has a hoarding disorder, and it was something like £46,000. So when you talk about a drop in the ocean, you know, one's going to cause someone to just restart the cycle, whereas the hope for services like ours is to, you know, prevent that from becoming a recurring problem. We've got another question from Darren, who's supported a chap who's living on the streets to move into a studio flat. The property's now become quite cluttered with unboxed Airfix models. It's quite interesting. And he's got mobility issues, but he's now at a risk of potentially losing the property due to fire. he's wondering how you would approach that, conversation potentially with that individual.
Right. I'm trying to read. I can see it in front of me as well, so I'm trying to read it as well, just to get my head.
That was my best summary, Darren. If I've missed some bits out, please tell me.
So do we know, is the flat, is there a landlord? Is there a tenancy? I imagine there is, from that, if he was homeless. You know, if someone owns their own property, they can do what they want, can't they? You know, if they own their own property and they're not causing an environmental sort of nuisance, they can you know, do what they want. Most of the people that we would deal with, just because of our referring agencies, they're either housing association or maybe social worker, but quite often with someone, you know, in a sort of a landlord-owned property, is that there is a tenancy agreement. They're in breach of the tenancy agreement. So, and because they're not stupid, we really do need to use that sometime. You know, the old good cop, bad cop. So we would be, and probably Fraser and Hannah, you also would be the good cop. You know, the people who I think possibly like Darren, tend to be one and the other. They can be good cop, and then they have to maybe do a bit of enforcement stuff, so it becomes bad cop, and that's very difficult to deal with. So that's why it's better having someone like us coming in, so that we can do the support side. But if they don't engage, and there are ways, and Darren, I'm sorry, I'm not answering this very well, in that it's difficult. There's always a way of doing it. I don't understand what he's saying about the rare, etc. But even still, there's always a way, and sometimes you need that sort of leverage off the tenancy side as well to you know, try and get that. And we'll often, maybe halfway through, if we see someone maybe begin to disengage or not engaging as much as they said that they would, we would get the refer in to have a chat with them and say, look, you know, we're, you know, paying for this has to be done, we need a bit more. And we do get results from that. We don't want to force people into anything, but there's always a way.
Yeah, I'm second that. I completely agree with that. We find, particularly the areas that I cover, because we are grant funded by housing associations, we do often play on the good cop, bad cop thing, and it does really help that person. Unfortunately, there are enforcements that do have to come from landlords, but we will obviously look at it from the other side with that person-centered approach, and be a different person. So where, you know, we're there because that housing association has referred us in, we're still seen as separate, and we can have that different approach, which does also quite help the landlord, because, you know, you've got both sides of it going in there to try and help kind of, I guess, motivate people in with a different way, you know.
Lovely. Yep. I can only see two questions in front of me. How do I
I can keep reading them out. We can
okay,
just do it that way. So I will skip a couple. So we've got one about a situation where there are health issues to consider for staff, such as dealing with infestations, hoarded bodily fluids. So how do you balance the dignity and privacy of the client with the need to wear protective clothing, etc.? That's actually a really good question.
It is. And it helped a lot, I have to say, by COVID over the last few years as well, where before I'd be saying no, please, even to my people, or to you know, the people that I'd be training over the years, saying, look, if you can, even if the smell's off, just if you can, don't put that on, because, you know, don't put a mask on. Simply because that person, people who hoard, they are embarrassed and ashamed, even though they may not, you know, they can mask that. They can come over sometimes as being quite abrupt, quite defensive, quite rude even, but they are masking, they're hiding the fact. And usually, again, us working with them and really getting to know them, and they open up, they will often say, you know, when you first came in, I was so embarrassed and so ashamed. So when it comes to, and they know that they are, you know, sort of whether it be bodily fluids, which we're coming across more and more now, you know, and certainly the training that I do to the staff that we've got, respect my staff, is that, you know, they have to realize that that's even more embarrassing, you know, for them. So to be just very, but we talk through them, and you know, no matter how bad the case we're in, there's always worse, and we will say to them, you know, don't think this is the worst we've come across. So yeah, so we just, but again, it's on that sort of individual basis. It really is. It's everyone's different. It's finding their way without being, you know, patronizing or condescending. It's being sort of open with them, and yeah. Is there an add to that one?
No, it massively is a case by case affair, really. You know, if it's to the point where there is a significant health issue to, you know, staff and to that individual, then sometimes needs do get taken out of their hands. Sometimes it is a case of actually we need to refer this to environmental health because you might be, you know, putting your own health at risk. If it's not to that extent, you know, we've had cases where there are sort of animals maybe living in the property, and there's feces and there's urine, and there are conversations to be had there, which can be quite difficult, but it's good to set those boundaries with people to say that, you know, I'm more than happy to support, but I'm not coming to support to clear out a litter tray. You know, these are parts of your life that you will need to do once I'm not here anymore. So, you know, we need to meet each other halfway here. You know, it's not nice for us to be working in environments where there is that kind of risk. In terms of wearing sort of protective equipment, it is very difficult. We wouldn't usually go out in full gear or anything unless the case sort of requested that or anything like that. You know, we have a lot of people, obviously, like Jack, you must come across, who have not left the house for a long time and will still require you to wear a mask. That's fine. You know, I worked in the health service before that, so it's sort of nothing really new for me. I think while there's someone we're working with now, actually, funny enough, who while we've been working with them, has sort of gained some confidence to go out and has sort of lost some of that that fear when it comes to other sort of health issues. So it's just like Jack said, it's about working with that person, seeing what they're comfortable about. With hoarding in general, there are things that some people will respond to, some people won't. Even the term hoarding will not go down well with certain people. You'll know that depending on the person you're speaking to. So just case by case.
Yeah, and one thing that I would advise as a professional going in is that we would never have, you sometimes see professionals kind of in the street, carers going in. I would never put any, if I required to wear PPE in someone's home, I would not have that on before. I mean, in some situation, you know, we'd have our lanyards on us, but we wouldn't be wearing them, because what we don't want to do is be pointing out, you know, this person's getting support, this person might be vulnerable, because you've got to think as well, like both have said, people are embarrassed sometimes, and if we're turning up, stood outside the front door, putting gloves and an apron on, we're telling everybody else that we need to put gloves and apron on, and that can be really triggering for someone, and that's going to break our trust and rapport before we've even walked in the door.
Yeah.
Okay, shall I read?
You see it? Yeah, for some reason I can't open one.
You're all right, Jack. I just saw quite a good one.
I can now.
Oh, I've lost it now. Sorry. So someone has asked, so John has asked to explain a little bit about how services secure funding and the resources we might have access to. So the time that it takes, access to transport, access to recycling centres, so if we need to take items there. So how does it kind of look, I guess, for the funding, how it's kind of split over covering those various aspects of the support we deliver? Who's
that better for? Is that for you, Fraser, or for?
I mean, I'm happy to start off. That's
Yeah.
absolutely fine. So, I mean, from P3's point of view, we do have, as Fraser said, we've got a few different services, and obviously jump in, Fraser. But we've got, you know, our funding comes from different places. So my services are housing association grant funded. So we've got a set budget to deliver support for a set amount of time for as many people as we can, delivering a quality service. We also offer spot purchase in various areas where we have kind of an hourly rate or a block payment. If we're doing spot purchase, we'd add those extra things on. So I'd put a invoice together for the rates for the support. But then if we needed a skip, if we needed to get a van, if we needed to go and get certain things, we then add that onto our invoicing. But it is, as I'm sure you'll know, because you've said that you're obviously working in a similar service, tricky when you have got budget constraints. But we do quite a lot of the stuff ourselves. So I know, Fraser, you were saying about it as well. Sometimes we'll kind of fill our cars up and we'll take them ourselves. And with the kind of tip runs and things like that, we have waste licenses. So as a charity, we are able to sign up to have a waste license to be able to take stuff. So that's very helpful, not having to kind of pay for those costs.
Yeah, we put a lot into as well, just sort of building our networks in areas, obviously, because I cover Warwickshire, and Warwickshire's, you know, we're talking to Atherstone down to Stratford upon Avon, so it's quite a large area. So it's good to have little links and things with charity shops, with, you know, local waste organisations and things, just to build that sort of support network that we can tap into. We've got cleaners that we've worked with before for little tasks and that kind of thing. So we basically have just built that over time. It's, you know, it's difficult, but it's just building, you know, support around for people. We're funded spot purchase, so we invoice Adult Social Care or Redditch Borough Council for the support that we think someone would need. Obviously that comes with sort of limitations, because we have periods of support, and it might be the case that you know, if we're not getting that level of engagement, that the council or Adult Social Care might turn around and say, actually, we're going to look for other services. But, you know, we've had fairly good success rate generally, and chat's moving all over the place. And yeah, it is difficult. It's just about exploring and tapping into resources where you can, which is a lot about you know, it's a lot of charity work in general, isn't it? It's just about finding and working collaboratively.
It does take a long time. It's taken us years to, you know, to really become established with, particularly with housing associations who were, I suppose, what I've always found is with hoarding, it's like ping pong. It goes, you know, if it goes in even into a MASH, you know, multi-agency support hub or something like that, it's you know, who pays, who's going to do this, who's going to do that, and quite often it did end up being thrown back, maybe at social services or. And it still is, actually, you know, it comes up again and again. Quite often housing, it might be the other way around. Social services say, well, you're housing him or her, so you can deal with it. And they think, well, where do we go? We don't have the special support. And then, you know, funny, I was in Belfast last week and was doing training with, it's not the first time it's happened, but some of the big housing providers there, what they're and I know what happens in England very much so as well. When I say England, Wales and Scotland, is where a housing provider they've maybe got a policy or procedure in place. They get so far and then think, right, okay, you know, we know we're probably going to down the enforcement route with this person who's hoarding, but we need to show first of all that we're, you know, doing our reasonable adjustments, or we're, you know, so all they do is they get a floating support provider to come in, you know, with their 2 hours a week or whatever for a few weeks, and it's them that are coming to me saying, Jack, can you train us up? We haven't a clue. We've been asked to do, you know, we've been sort of dumped these hoarding cases on us, and we just don't have the expertise or the, you know, time to do it. So it's it's, all along. So what I've been saying to the big hoarding providers that I work with, and they don't fund us as such, they fund us on an individual basis. So we will do a referral, they'll do a referral, we'll do a quote, and that quote is usually based on comparable cases, with I'll get the practitioner to take, hopefully photographs, and sort of write up, and I'll look at that compared to other cases, and we come up with the price then. The very odd, and also for us, it's very much around running a small company, is around cash flow. And we were finding we might work for 3 months for someone and then put the invoice in, and then it takes another 2-3 months for it to come through. There's no way we could afford to keep going like that. So we actually have the money now up front and make sure it's in place, so that, as I say, nothing worse than doing an initial visit, getting that person excited that there might be some change coming for them, and then the person then goes and says, oh, no, I have to try and find funding, and that takes months, and the person's forgotten about you by the time you get back to them.
Yeah.
Okay,
No,
any more questions there?
There's a nice one from Jade Shaw. So it says, how do you manage that boundary line of going at their own pace, yet still keeping movement? As the pushback and deflective talking can be difficult to manage.
Or is that why we have two? Yes, that is why we have two. Absolutely. Because again, Jed, that's a good point. And I was trying to get over that, one person going in, because they will do anything to deflect. If they really don't want you in there. And some people, for someone to for us to get a referral, we have to have the agreement from the individual who's hoarding or extreme clutter that they will engage. So, but often they'll say that because they know if they don't, they'll just go down a enforcement route. So when we go in, we realize they had no intention of engaging. But we can actually sometimes get them to change their minds as well, by talking to them. But yes, certainly having two. And because they're smart people as well, they can really deflect you, off the sort of you might have a sort of idea of what you want to get over to them that day, and that sort of discussion, and then they completely, lowball you, and you think, where on earth that come from? And so if two people, you can get someone to just, butt in, or to, help you as well. I've just seen one there, the one before that, from Harriet in Bristol, the food banks in Bristol, specialty agents or charities working in the city of South Gloucester. Harriet, we do cover, Respect My Staff covers Bristol, South Gloucestershire, North Somerset. I honestly don't know of anyone else apart from Bristol City Council, but of course they wouldn't be into South Gloucester or North Somerset either. So I do genuinely think that we're the only one doing this sort of work there. Unfortunately, we don't get funding, so we can't go in and whatever it is needs to be funded along the way. Any more there? Sorry, I'm looking at that. Helen there. Helen, Respect My Stuff in P3, working in Southeast Sussex. That's sort of up from Brighton and Hove. And I don't. We're getting into West Sussex now. So we've sort of gone from Dorset into Southampton, into Portsmouth, and now we're going over towards. So we will get there eventually, but it could be a while. I honestly don't know anyone else in that area.
Yeah, it's not an area we cover as far as I'm aware. We are looking to roll the service out nationally, so if there is a need, then yeah, that's absolutely something I'm sure above my pay grade, but I'm sure they'll look into. With those who have an emotional attachment to items that are being removed, who does the removing? Are there any issues where the individual can raise complaints that you've removed items they didn't want to be removed? So this was a concern of mine when I first started working in the role, in the sense that, Jack, when you work with two people, obviously you've got someone else there to back and go, actually, this hasn't been removed, it's just been, moved. It is something to be mindful of. If you are just working with one person, It's why we work so closely with that person to make sure it's not just us removing things. It's a collaborative effort. They're removing things. You know, we do get questions about, oh, I can't find this, but honestly, we've always been able to find them, which is just out of luck, really. But it emphasizes how important it is to work with them. You know, if I've found sometimes we're working with two people, if one person's working with that person and then the other person somewhere else, they can be a little bit, oh, there's someone else here and they're doing things that I don't know about. So having them involved, having them engaged is really the only way you can sort of prevent any sort of issues like that we found.
Yeah, no, I agree. I understand what you're saying, but again, you won't get me away from the two people to, you know, paired because you won't get me, you won't swing me that way. And it's the automatic default. There are some cases we do because simply you can't get into the two people can't even get into the property because of the amount of stuff. But in general, the default is 2 to 10. And just, you know, one example there would be money. We're finding so much cash rolled up in, I mean, thousands inside kitchen roll, you know, the containers and everything. And what we do, our process is that if we come across things like that, cash or maybe jewelry, whatever, is that we will, in front of the person, the other person is with us, will turn on a video camera and count out, you know, whatever there is. It's not perfect, but it's much better than just one person, you know, being in that position.
Yeah, I've never found cash actually. I've never had it reported. None of my services have ever found cash. But what I have done in the past when people have said they're happy for things to go, but I mean, for example, there was a watch and a gentleman was happy for the watch to go, but the receipt was still in a box and it was worth about £80. So I just got he just did a little disclaimer for me. I had like a little printout for it for things of kind of like high monetary value, and he just signed that off for me so that I knew, because I obviously was quite concerned. And then what I did was kind of just I waited a little bit of time. I kind of held on to it, locked it in a drawer in the office before I donated it to charity, just to make sure he wasn't going to change his mind. That was like kind of back in my early days of starting to do these things. So I was just kind of testing different things out. But yeah, British Heart Foundation would have been very happy, I'm sure, with that donation.
I see one there from Tess. Do you have any advice on people who have storage containers or lockers full of possessions along with their home? Don't offer them a garage. Don't offer them anything else, because they'll just fill it. But it's quite interesting that I suppose, Tess, it depends also what are they doing with the home. You know, is their home absolutely full, so like 7, 8 or 9, as well as the containers? Because actually, what, just sort of going off that slightly, but in the similar vein, what we've done is only through it was in Winchester, and it was about a year ago or so, or maybe a couple of years ago, we had one of our customers there, lovely man, and into, you know, books and stuff from charity shops, and the place was, and I'm talking a 9 the whole way through, 1-bedroom flat, so there's the fire risk and everything as well. It was so bad, it was so cluttered that we just couldn't. I remember giving Patrick a lift up into the living room, because to see if he could actually see over the stuff at the doorway in the living room, and, you know, try and get himself in there. So I had a coffee with the customer there, and said, look, just a thought, we're not going to take anything, but what if we rent a storage unit nearby? And there's one of those, you know, the new, you know, dry sort of you know, superstore sort of storage units. So I said, what if we rent a thing there just for a couple of months? And because at the minute we can't do a thing, you can't even move something from one bit to another. There was no room whatsoever. Anyway, he was in agreement, as long as, you know, we had the promise that we wouldn't get rid of anything. We would just take it, move it from there to there. And then we would clear his house, do a bit of a deep clean as well, and then he could ask what he wanted back and what he needed. And sure enough, you know, we got, you know, the place, and he was just absolutely over the moon. He said, "Oh, I really fancy my little, you know, bookshelf or whatever, and a few other bits and pieces, and you know, more stuff." We reckon less than 10% of the stuff came back, and then after about 6 weeks, he said, "All the rest can go." And it was good stuff. And we went to, he said, "Look, right, you know, what charity?" And it was, I think it was Naomi House, which was a children's charity in Winchester, and the hospice also. And we were just doing van loads of stuff to them. They were delighted, really, really delighted. So yeah, I would just say, I think it was a test that asked that question. Just you know, if they're using it, sometimes out of sight can be out of mind. So it can be a good thing, but it has to be very, very you know, policed very well to make sure they don't use that as an excuse to then have an empty space and fill it. And this person's being monitored, you know, on a sort of more than monthly basis to make sure that he hasn't regressed, and he hasn't.
Yeah, I just echo that. I think it can be a useful tool, because you are taking someone out of what can be a very you know, when you go into a hoarded environment, you can imagine sort of the clutter there, but the clutter that's going on in their mind when they're having to be around that all the time. And you know, an old gentleman who, when he would put a letter down, things would collapse on him. He actually went into respite, and it just sort of cleared all the worry and the anxiety that was coming from the way that he had been living. You know, being in an environment that is clear and actually lets you do the things you need to do can be a really useful tool, but you would have to police it. You know, I've worked with someone at the moment who has a storage unit that is full, and they also have another property that was left to them by their mother who passed, and I've only seen that the first time a couple of weeks ago, and it is full to the rafters. And when I first started working with her, she couldn't get into her own property. She was renting a room down the street. So you've got there's some really strong hoarding, you know, but having that clear space could allow just a little bit of freedom of mind, freedom of thought, so we could work through things systematically and try and look at what the best ways works, you know, for her. And that's sort of how we've been going with her at the moment. And you know, we're having some good success with her.
Yeah. They do forget. People do forget. When I think the best thing is when people come out, maybe of hospital or whatever, they may have been in a respite for 2 or 3 months, and they come back home, and then they go in and say, "It wasn't like that when I left it." Meaning there's more stuff than when they left. And you try and put over the look. A burglar usually takes, doesn't add.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a good one. Anything else, Sarah? How we're doing time wise? We've got 7 minutes left.
Yeah, there's one for, oh, it jumps, doesn't it? Sorry. Amber, I think. So yeah, Amber was just asking around some examples of good questions to ask people that might be living in a hoarded home.
Oh, I've got a handout if she wants to email me that I do with my training. There's just sample questions to ask, that not to take in and sort of, you know, go through the list with them, but just the sorts of things around, even things like, have you ever had a fire? You know, an accidental fire, or you know, how do you heat yeah, loads and loads of questions like that. So if they want to, hopefully my email address will be there. I can see one from an anonymous attendee. Do you think hoarding has increased due to an increase in online shopping? Yeah. It is it hoarding, or is it extreme clutter, or is it through depression, or is it through bipolar? But yeah, definitely it's
We've
yeah.
certainly seen that.
Yeah.
You know, when we talk about COVID, that I think there was an interesting thing. I think a lot of people assume that because of COVID, there's going to be a big increase with hoarding, and that's probably been the case. What I've found generally is that coming out of lockdown, it's seemingly given people almost a reason to look for help, because they've got something to say, well, this wasn't like this before. Lockdown happened, and then I've got myself in this terrible situation. And we've worked with people, and as we talk to them, it's apparent this has been going on for a long time. But when you take that blame away, so it's not them, it's not their responsibility, it's not a problem they've caused, it's because of this external circumstance, then we're seeing more people who have, hoarding condition or extreme clutter, and actually they're coming out because they can have help that isn't going to feel like someone's judging them. It was a shared thing for everyone.
And even just a bit more on that one of the things, Fraser, that we're finding when we have the hoarding support groups is that the feedback we're getting, the written feedback about what people think of the hoarding support group is that they sit there, with their cup of tea, a bit of a, cake or whatever, and they say they never realized they'd meet someone who does what they do or what they did. And it's just lovely for them to, and sometimes they come for months and don't even really speak, they're nice, they're not unpleasant, but they will and then all of a sudden they'll open up one day. They've built up the courage because they feel that, I suppose, quite often people feel that they're like a freak of nature, that they're the only one, which in a way, sometimes those awful TV programs can be helpful in that, but that's as far as it goes for me.
It's such a private condition, and people will just live that way forever if sort of allowed to. We've had referrals. We had a referral in for someone who the referral came through safeguarding because a postman couldn't get a letter through the front door. It's hard to look for help because there's such a stigma around it. And when you think about it, so hoarding affects, between 5 and 8% of the UK, so it's more
2 and 5. But I'd even say, even if you take just a 2%, that's still a lot of people. It really is.
It's more than bipolar and schizophrenia combined in the UK. So it's a huge amount of people, and a lot of whom are, suffering in silence, really.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay,
anything else you've been looking through? Any
few minutes left. I think someone's asked to know more about the services and stuff. So everything's going to be shared from today. So obviously feel free just to get in touch with any of us. That's absolutely fine if you want to know more about what we all do. All the details will be shared on that. And then there's some long ones here, so bear with me. So we've got Caroline, who works for Street Storage, storing belongings for people predominantly experiencing homelessness. It's not uncommon for the outcomes teams to contact us to store huge amounts of items for people. So then the referrer doesn't explicitly say that the person has a hoarding disorder. They deal with this every day, the balance between keeping the person's belongings and then just, whether or not to dispose them.
That's interesting. I wonder where that is, because I've done some work in Cardiff where they have someone similar sort of thing, I think. And in fact, Cardiff City Council, they were brilliant, because what they did was they, for people who are homeless, street homeless, do you ever see the people, with maybe a trolley, shopping trolley full of stuff? And you're looking at it and you're thinking, oh, what just this load of rubbish or whatever. It is so precious to them, and it's such a safety blanket for them as well. And what they did, they had one of the night shelters in Cardiff, and the city centre there, it was for them, but they also put on a sort of an outside area, but it was covered, to make it waterproof, to allow for people with their trolleys and with their belongings to keep them there as well, because it's so precious. So, Caroline, I can see what you're saying, because and that's a difficult one, actually, even though it may not look as though any sort of real, intrinsic value, but to them, it really, could be. I'm happy to answer that with it if you want to do me an email afterwards or whatever, because I find it an interesting one. I think we're probably we're on time there. So right, I'm just going to say thank you to everyone. It's just a shame you can't see the people that are out there, but it's nice having for me to be able to see even, you know, Hannah and Fraser as well. That helps. And I see lots of thank yous as well from people in the chat. So yeah, so you know, thank you from me and the two of you, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Yes,
of course.
yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's
Yeah, thank
it's
you
been
too.
really interesting to be part of, and like you said, yeah, you know, get in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. Me and Hannah did a podcast with StreetLink. I'd be remiss if I didn't get a plug in. So there is a little bit more information on that as well, if people are interested.
Lovely. Right, that's yeah, we're getting lovely feedback there. Thanks everyone. Where's Amelia? Where are you? Where what do we do now?
Hi there. Yeah, so I will now end the webinar and then that will be finished. Thank you very much, Jack, and three of you.
Lovely.
Cheers.
Lovely.
Thank
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Just take care.
Bye.
Bye.